Do you want to lose belly fat, but you just can't make any progress? I know exactly what that feels like. This used to be me. I was fat, unattractive, and had no confidence whatsoever. This is me now. I'm lean, I'm way more attractive, and I have so much better confidence. In this video, I'm going to show you 4 different things that you must avoid so that you never have to struggle with losing belly fat again. So you can also get similar results to me, but in way less time. Number 1, making your diet overcomplicated. This is one of the most common problems that people face, especially when they're first starting out to get in shape. And I did the same thing myself, We tend to make our diets so complicated for no reasons whatsoever. For some reason, when we hear the words eating healthy, we just instantly assume that we need to make this massive meal plan, eat this meal here and do this thing and do this thing. But that is far from the truth if you actually want to make progress. Me personally, I tried so many different ways, different ways to eat and different diets. And what I have learned through experience is that the best way to stay consistent, right, is to make it as simple as possible. Just think about this to yourself. Whenever you try to do something in your life, whatever it can be, right, if you make it more complicated than it has to be, instead of making it simple, have you noticed how it's so much harder, to even complete the task or do it consistently over a longer period of time? This is the same thing when it comes to eating. The more complicated you make it, the harder it's going to be consistent. Now, what I did myself, to go from looking like this to now looking like this is to follow 2 simple rules when it comes to eating. Number 1, I stick to whole foods only. What this basically means is that you eat foods that are unprocessed and with as little extra ingredients in them as possible. Chicken breast is nothing more than just chicken breast, keeping it simple. Number 2, I have foods on rotation. Now, what this means is, that I have a couple of ingredients that I rotate on a week-to-week basis, so I don't have to eat the same meal over and over and over and, just get bored of food in general. Now, if you feel like you're struggling with the way that you eat and you want my personal help with this, where I will guide you step by step along the way to lose fat, but also get way more attractive along the way too, then click the first link in the description and watch that video. Now, I mentioned whole foods, right? Now, what I mean specifically with whole foods is things like chicken, ground beef, steak, fish, simple proteins. And then I combine that with some kind of carbohydrate, rice or potatoes, keeping it as simple as possible. Now, I mentioned I keep these ingredients on a rotation, right, every single week. So, for example, it can look like chicken and rice and potatoes for 1 week. I have chicken and rice, then chicken and potatoes, and, I mix it up to keep it interesting. And then the next week, I switch the protein. So I have like ground beef with rice or potatoes, and, you get the gist of it. Now, if you're the type of person, who can eat the same single meal every single day, day in and day out, just having chicken and rice or, chicken and broccoli or whatever you can think of. If you're that type of person, it's going to be way easier, to stick to a meal plan. But if you like variety in food, this is a great way to switch it up, switch the protein on a week-to-week basis. This way, you're not eating foods that you think is so boring. I know you might be thinking, that I'm talking about these ingredients, chicken, ground beef, fish, and steak or whatever. And you think to yourself, that sounds like the most boring and bland foods I've ever heard in my life. But just think about this, right? There are literally so many different recipes that you can do with these ingredients, that are not only healthy, but they're also easy to make and they're actually tasty. You just have to make a quick search on Google or, YouTube, and you can find so many different recipes that use these ingredients over and over and over. Number 2, not having a strong reason why. One of the biggest things that I see people struggle with, especially when they're first starting out, is their mindset. You approach fitness with the mindset that you just want to look good for the sake of looking good and no other reasons why. If you want to get in shape just for the sake of getting shape and no other reason why, that is not going to be a strong enough motivation for you to actually stay consistent. I can tell you this from experience. Because me, right, when I first wanted to get in shape and, I was looking into fitness stuff, I simply just wanted to look good for the sake of looking good, because previously I was so overweight. I was able to be consistent for like 2 weeks or so. I was eating better and I was exercising. But after those 2 weeks, the same pattern kept appearing over and over. I kept quitting, after those 2 weeks. And the main reason was because I didn't have a strong reason why I actually wanted to continue. I didn't have a reason why I wanted to change in the first place. I took some time to really think about this, and that's when everything completely changed for me. I created something in my mind that I was actually working towards, rather than, such a vague reason. Oh, I want to look good for the sake of looking good. You have deeper reasons why, but you just have to take the time to figure them out. For me personally, right, I wanted to be more confident. I wanted to get more attention from girls. And I wanted to be happy, actually happy and, proud of seeing my body when I was looking at it in the mirror. Those are like one of the main reasons why I personally wanted to change. These were the honest reasons why I wanted to change. And you don't want to look good just for the sake of looking good. That's not the truth. You want the benefits of looking good, not just looking good for the sake of it. What comes with looking good and, being more attractive is more confidence, more attention, and, the list goes on. Those are the real reasons why you want to change. So if you're struggling with staying consistent and, you want to get in shape, then ask yourself this question: why do I want to change in the first place? Take some time to really think about this and be honest with yourself. Either write it down on a piece of paper or, as a reminder in the notes on your phone, so you can just look at it on a regular basis. Because if you keep looking at it over and over, you will adapt a different mindset when it comes to getting in shape. Now, once you actually do this and, take the time and do what I say, it will be like 10 times easier for you to actually start being consistent, because you have a clear goal that you're actually working towards. It's so much easier to stay consistent with anything in your life if you have a clear goal that you're working towards, or, something that you have to complete. By just having something that you're working towards when it comes to getting in shape, it's so much easier in every aspect. I have been the person, who's been lost when it comes to getting in shape. And this was the complete game changer. Just trust me when I say this. Now, if you feel like you're struggling with this and you want my personal help, where I will guide you step by step along the way to start losing fat, but also get way more attractive, faster than it took me personally, then click the first link in the description and watch that video. Number 3, not adding exercise into the mix. Here's the thing: if you just improve the way that you eat, you will make good progress. There is no question about it. But if we add exercise along the way, with the way that we eat, we can make great progress actually in less time than you think. Now, when I talk about exercise, what I mean specifically is resistance training. This can either be body weight exercises or you do weightlifting at the gym. Now, why this is important in the first place is because, if you only focus on eating better, you will make progress. However, you would just end up looking skinny. But if you combine the eating with the exercise in some form, you can also build muscle along the way. Meanwhile, you lose the fat. You look better, but also get slimmer at the same time. Now, what I recommend most people to start with, and is a good level in my opinion, is 3 days a week. Some kind of exercise. Let's say Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Let's talk about the gym specifically, because that's what I do, to build muscle. If you have close to no experience whatsoever in working out at the gym, then what I would recommend you to do is don't focus, on what kind of workout routine you need to do, but more so that you show up to the gym in the first place. Just show up to the gym in the first place for 3 days and, you try and do it consistently. Just getting into the habit of showing up is a massive step in the right direction. Now, once you feel like you can show up to the gym consistently, for those 3 days that I'm talking about, that's when I would focus on a more serious workout routine. And what I recommend most people to start with is push-pull legs. And let me show you what a routine looks like. This is what the routine looks like. This hits pretty much all the muscles you need to build an attractive body for yourself. Ease yourself into it and don't stress yourself out, with following it 100% from the start. Just do a few of the exercises and, just get the feel for it. Take your time and eventually you will be able to follow through with the whole routine. Once you get consistent with this kind of workout routine, you will actually make so much faster progress than you think, because you're just starting out. Pretty much every new person that starts working out, they have what's called newbie gains, beginner gains pretty much. And what this basically means is that because your body is not used to this kind of exercise, right, it will actually make significant progress in less time than someone who's way more experienced, because it's such a new thing for your body. Now, a good rule that I like to tell people, when it comes to exercise, is simply just following the rule of just moving your body more on a day-to-day basis It doesn't have to be weightlifting or, doing bodyweight exercises. If you don't enjoy any of those things, then that is completely fine too. But just focus on moving your body more in general and do any kind of exercise. Any kind of exercise on a daily basis is better than not doing anything at all. Now, what I did personally, besides just weightlifting, is just doing more walking on a daily basis. No kidding when I tell you this. This picture, right, from looking like this to now looking like this, the main type of cardio that I did was more walking on a daily basis. Just, like a 30 to 40 minute walk every single day. It makes a massive difference even if you don't believe me. Number 4, not having enough patience to see the results. You probably hear this constantly over and over and over, but it's actually the truth. One of the main reasons, or probably the one main reason why people don't get in shape is because they don't have the patience to do this stuff long enough to actually get the results they want. It's way too common for people to approach fitness with this short-term mindset. They go on crash diets and, super intense cardio sessions. They go for like 3-hour runs every single day and, the list goes on. This is not sustainable. What ends up happening like 90% of the time, if you approach fitness with this short-term mindset, is that in just a matter of weeks, or maybe even just in a matter of days, you get overwhelmed and then you decide to quit. And this is a cycle that keeps repeating every single time that you try and get in shape. You have to change the approach. Just think about this, right? A person can work super hard, really intense workouts every single day for 2 weeks and barely make any progress. But there's another person who takes it less intense, but they do it over a longer period of time than 2 weeks. They will make so much faster progress, even though it's on a longer time span, because you're just being more consistent. It's all about having a consistent routine that you can do sustainably for a long amount of time. This is like the core principle when it comes to getting any results, especially in fitness or, just in life in general. If you keep at it long enough, you will get better. There's just no question about it. Like, be honest, right? Wouldn't you want to look good and be healthy until the day that you die? Because that's what I personally want to do. So why are you approaching fitness with this short-term mindset if you actually want to have a healthy life? Now, if you start seeing fitness more like a lifestyle rather than something temporary, this will make a massive difference in the results that you get. Just trust me when I say this. Longevity is the name of the game. Not only will you feel better physically, but also mentally. Have you noticed, like, when you approach things with this short-term mindset, you just want to go 100% right from the start, you get so stressed out about it because you want faster results. And this just makes you so overwhelmed, and then you decide to quit. And you're so stressed out about not getting the results, so you try to push even harder, and it's only making things worse. Take the slower approach. Create a routine for yourself that you enjoy doing, and it's actually sustainable for you. And that's all that you need. In just a matter of time, you will get the results if you just keep going. Now, if you feel like you're struggling with this and you want my personal help, where I will guide you step by step along the way to start losing fat, but also getting so much more attractive in less time than it took me personally, like in these 2 pictures right here, then click the first link in the description and watch that video.